Thank you all for joining our Securing Your Infrastructure On-Prem from AI Attacks Roundtable. I'd like to introduce our moderator today, Brent Schroeder. Brent, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Jamie. My name is Brent Schroeder. I'm the head of the Office of the CTO in SUSE. Today, we're going to have hopefully a very invigorated discussion around security and some of the new challenges evolving and arising, as AI becomes more prevalent, and just as architectures evolve and infrastructure evolves over the last few years, and how fast it's moving, and how you can be more secure in your environment. And with me to facilitate this discussion today, I've got two subject matter experts in this space, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Jordan, would you kick that off?
All right, just to show off my technological credentials, it took me forever to find the mute button, so please trust me. Hi, my name's Jordan. I'm part of the Domain Solution Architects team here at SUSE. I've been in the IT industry, I say earning money doing IT primarily for about 32 years at large super providers. I've been at IBM, Savvis, CenturyLink, a couple of startups. I've got a lot of infrastructure background, but I've been very focused on kind of two things merged together lately, at least in the last 4 to 5 years, and that is security in containerized environments like Kubernetes. So with that background, I like to say I know a little bit about a lot, and I know a lot about nothing. So, but I've seen some things. That's why I'm here. Right, Jerry, you go ahead, sir.
And Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry Girella from New York, and I'm a domain security specialist. So I assist the folks in the field to help SUSE customers have a long career in cybersecurity, more recently focused on Kubernetes and container microservices environments. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Okay, well, let's open it up with just setting a little bit of context and some of the new things that are emerging in the security spectrum. And as we outlined in the abstract, oh yes, we want to do a couple of quick polls to get some context. Thank you, Jamie.
Right in your face, sir. we're data nerds, right? We like data.
Absolutely. So if everybody all the participants that are online, if you guys could answer this question, how are you handling compliance in Kubernetes? And like some of your thoughts on that. And Jamie, can you see the results coming in?
And I can see the
majority. Okay.
Yes, we got a few that do not have any compliant workloads running containers. We've got the majority, though, running in containerized environments and passing on it.
Okay, I do see the results now. So very good. It's interesting that 0% are not subject to any regulations, which is not surprising. So, which definitely makes this a critical topic. All right, so let's. Do we have another question, Jamie?
I think we do. I'm going to close that poll. I've got some. We have a question, and I think I'd like to share it with the audience too as we get in, because I think you agree, Brent. That makes this kind of interesting. But it's a yes/no question, and here it comes on the screen. This is a vibe check, right? Are you, those who can see the poll and hear our voices, do you think that attacks feel a little bit more sophisticated in the recent couple of years? I know it's a very yes/no kind of question. And then we'll discuss that, like what makes you feel that way. It's a therapy session, really.
Okay, and not surprising, 100% agree with that. So let me tee it up with this question, Jordan and Gary. And we started with the artificial intelligence question. As this continues to advance, the concerns are rising about its potential to be used in cyber attacks and to facilitate more. What are some of the examples of the techniques that you've seen bad actors are starting to utilize that puts infrastructure applications at risk?
Jerry, I'll let you run with that one first. I have a couple ideas in my mind as well, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, just to set the table, the way I see things playing out with our customers is that it's a double-edged sword. I have a lot of customers that are running their AI applications in Kubernetes and containers. So you need to protect that infrastructure as well as protecting from AI-based attacks. So you have to look at both sides. So as far as protecting the actual infrastructure is concerned, I think that it's really important to look at full life cycle, number one, from creating the actual code to the retirement of those actual containers. So there's a lot in between that involves scanning, which is table stakes, as well as the runtime side. It's also important to look at, I think the key is behavioral based, because containers are ephemeral, and so they basically only last a short time, and they're immutable. So they do the same things over and over again, which present both, an opportunity in a chaotic environment that is, singularly difficult to protect. But as far as the actual attacks that we're seeing, we have a list of scams, for instance, that most people have probably heard of already, of like deep fake voice contacting someone to wire funds somewhere that's made to sound like the CEO of a company. You have deep fake digital content, deep fake videos. The other day I saw a video of the Beatles playing Led Zeppelin, which was really very impressive. It's not true, but you would never know it if you didn't have context. Deep fake documents, so fake everything. So that's to me.
Now everybody's Googling that, Jerry.
Yeah,
I want to see that.
Very cool stuff. But we also have the actual technical side, utilizing traditional tools to gain access, and then utilizing large language models to work at the speed of light, practically, to scan potential vulnerabilities, to see where the weaknesses are, to see where the chinks in your armor are in very rapid speed, and taking advantage of those very quickly and taking over your environment. So the dawn of AI presents a whole different set of attack vectors that we need to think about and plan for in advance. So that's my opening remarks on that.
Now, that's an interesting point about the the bad actors can gather a lot of data, and now they can utilize AI to analyze you, right? And that's an interesting twist that I hadn't thought of, as far as how AI can be applied. Historically, too much data, and so they have to use more brute force methods, or a broad range of methods. Here they can analyze an infrastructure and quickly, ascertain, oh, here's an attack that may work best on this target, based on the data that my analysis gathered. Very interesting point.
Yeah, I agree with you both, right? I mean, even buttoning up what you both said, because that was on my mind too. From an AI perspective, what we're actually seeing out there is not so much that the attacks have changed in their nature, but it's as an attacker, I can be a much quicker study being a script kiddie by just using something like ChatGPT to come up with the commands. Like, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. It doesn't make me more evil. It just makes me better at being evil if I'm going to script kiddie some of those commands. And you guys both pointed it out too. And I think that that's one of the places where all of us are most vulnerable, are to just, human beings muck things up, right? Either getting tricked making bad mistakes, not doing QA like you thought you were doing QA, things like that. It's a lot easier for an AI to do a lot of those phishing attacks. So they have been more sophisticated. And again, the same old tricks are really being sped up. If I decided today that I was 19 and angry at some company and knew nothing about coding, AI helps me come up to speed or just do all the work for me. So I think the attacks become more widespread. And like you said, Brent, error correction, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. So the data is out there. I think that's one of the other things too, is those public bots are feeding off of data that has been exfiltrated either willingly or not willingly. And one of the things that I think we can start to do is get a little bit better about making sure that our data doesn't exfiltrate, because that becomes a seed point for more AI attacks. When you aren't watching where your data is going, once it's out there, I've now got robots designing attacks.
Yeah.
Looking at the other side of the coin there, you have to look at insiders, because companies and developers are now leveraging AI to augment the writing of the code, and you can inadvertently share, proprietary information that is being put out there that can be, monetized or leveraged in some way by bad actors. And there's also the potential of having AI write actual code that'll leave security gaps, that people aren't really thinking about. So really demand the SBOM or provenance of your code to make sure that it's, the real deal, and that you're not leaving yourself open to potential threats.
So let me kind of move on to advancing through the discussion. So there's new threats coming at us faster than ever, and we make ourselves vulnerable, many times, and how we interact with our environment, the outside world, etc. How do these new threats or evolving threats kind of subvert some of the traditional cybersecurity defense schemes?
Call a name, Brent. Pick a name out of a hat.
I was gonna I'll let either one of you.
I'll go first this time. I've got a real quick one.
Yeah,
One of the things, and I'm going to pick up on something that actually Jerry said earlier too, and he talked about the full life cycle. And again, I'm noticing that human beings make mistakes in security, and one of them is I really notice less sophistication than I would like to see at organizations in defense in depth. I see a lot of orgs still go, wow, we are really good at this spot. We're really good at the SBOM part, or we're really good, like in a containerized environment, we're really good at emission control, or we're spending millions of dollars on this firewall vendor. And a lot of these things are very good, but we wind up getting this false comfort about how good those things are. And all somebody has to do is penetrate one of them, and that next layer behind it is wide open. I want to see people get better at defense in depth and assume you're hacked or you're going to be hacked. Always have plan B, plan C. And I'm sure that everybody on this call is nodding, oh, yes, yes, of course. I'm telling you, I see a majority of organizations I talk to really missing the mark, even on the frameworking and the intent inside of their organization.
Along with that, I mentioned, reconnaissance at scale, but there's also prompt injection, where basically they're hijacking large language models and injecting malicious code in there. So when folks are accessing it, they're inadvertently taking in this code. And again, it's important, very important to scan these and be able to identify them. There's also injection into integrations with APIs. Folks are building APIs all the time. That's another source of vulnerability. So it's extremely important that you use a tool that will, scan these and block these. And the best way to block AI is through not like observability only, but the ability to be inline, and cluster or cloud centric, so that it can actually stop the threat through automation and not have human intervention required. So that takes a very special type of tool.
Oh, Brent, you wound up on mute, sir.
Yeah.
There we go.
So on that point, what are some of the approaches that are proving effective against the evolution of the threats and the increasing complexity of threats?
My first,
Jerry, you want to? Gonna throw this one back over to Jerry to start that. You brought up a couple of points in there. I want you to elaborate on those.
It's I think that our quick poll first, please. Yes.
oh yeah, sorry, that was my fault. I pressed a button and thought that would be useful, not distracting. Lesson learned.
Specifically with regard to what we're doing, you know, a lot of folks are, you know, I guess speaking about eBPF, which is the extended Berkeley packet filtering, which is the, you know, I guess the de rigueur way to observe vulnerabilities, to observe threats. But we liken it to wearing a bulletproof vest that only works on the second bullet. You know, if the threat gets by you and attacks the kernel, leveraging AI, you know, it's too late. So you really need to use tools that have the ability to use this behavioral analysis to make sure it's a deny all by default, and so that you can actually protect yourselves from the equivalent of a zero-day attack. Because a lot of these attacks that are created in AI will be 0 days. And the only way to do that is to make sure your environment has gone through a learning mode, and leveraging the, you know, the ephemeral nature and the immutability to learn what happens in your container. Like if you have a machine tool on an assembly line that's created to do 2 things, and you see it start doing a 3rd thing, you have to stop that immediately, and you'll be able to identify it and to stop that. That's the crux of it, you know, in an analogy. So other thoughts, John?
A lot of follow-up from what you said, right? You mentioned that entire concept of zero trust, which is not new. We've been doing zero trust in computing environments for many, many years, 30, 40 years. And I think we attached that word or that buzzword to it only a little while ago. But it's an actual thing, and it's very straightforward. Zero trust is the way we've been running next generation firewalls, or the way my bank account works, right? Make sure you just know the appropriate behavior of your environment, which sometimes can be very, very easy, and implicitly trust nothing else. We do that with firewall things. We do that with tooling inside of Kubernetes. An analogy to that is the security line at the airport when the airport's working. That is a great analogy of zero trust. Any one of us goes to the airport, no one is allowed through unless they explicitly are. The answer is no, unless you have a boarding pass and your passport or some form of identification. Otherwise, the answer is no. Much like a reservation list at a fancy restaurant, that's actual zero trust. It's easier to maintain, it's less burdensome, and it's different than threat-based. And sometimes I see people get those things flip-flopped. Back to the airport analogy, if you look at a no-fly list, that is a threat-based control. You're like, hey, that person should never fly again. What do airports use? They use them both in conjunction. Things we know that we want to protect against, and we also know what the right environment looks like, and we protect against things that are abnormal to that behavior. Jerry said it, Brent said it as well. Make sure you're wrapping those things around your environment. Again, not only from containerized environment, but even watching, you know, what's getting inside of your machine. Is your, even at the Linux kernel level, you know, we don't want mutations there. So, you know, if you're a note-taking kind of person, look at some of the capabilities of confidential compute. So we know that we're protecting data at rest, in transit, which we've all heard about, and in use, right? If I have data that's been encrypted on my disk and then it's encrypted as it flows across the wire, when my computer, my applications have to use that data, it is then decrypted so it can be used and it's memory resident. That's where trusted, confidential compute comes in to make sure that that in use portion does not mutate. And that is a very important frontier, I believe, to look at. And I think that it's also that confidential compute has become, it's very new. And if you're not doing that in your org or not looking at it, I encourage you to do so today.
I want to elaborate and come back to a term we've used here that may not be recognized or the relevance of it, and that's behavior. What I've typically find often in zero trust is that it's a very specific domain or part of the infrastructure that is almost manually configured, right? Identity,
Right.
network configuration and ports, right? Which takes explicit action most of the time by a human, which in today's world, the speed of change doesn't really work in a human oversight context. Could you elaborate a little bit more on behavioral learning and the behavioral-based zero trust? Jordan, you want to?
Yeah, and I think I think that's from a tooling standpoint. You're right, right? Not only do humans slow things down, we've all agreed earlier on that humans are a main focus point of vulnerabilities. But on the flip side, is there manual intervention? How do we wrap those shells around it? You're right, getting tooling involved that can actually take a snapshot of what appropriate behavior is inside of your environment. And as we're getting access to far more AI tools and even some machine learning, that allows a tooling, a platform to go, hey, that appears anomalous. Like that's normal behavior, but that's coming from Alice's laptop at 2:30 in the morning. Well, that seems weird. And we then are able to generate intelligent alerts to alert the human beings to something they can do something about, right? We all know the mantra, the sign on the wall that says, don't alert somebody to something they can't do something about, or the human beings get tired and walk away. So that sophistication on the other end to go, that's not necessarily not normal behavior because we have explicitly allowed these parameters, but to be able to say, this is outside of what feels normal, we should investigate here. I'm really excited about the frontier of being able to use AI in that way, just beyond machine learning, to go, attention human, this one's peculiar, here's a ticket. And then being able to feed back to those models and go, oh, that was a false positive, dear AI. Here's why we felt that that was a false positive, and the model gets to learn. So I'm really excited to see that. I'm experimenting around with some of that, as a project right now.
Another perspective you need to look at is to a lot of these, specifically OpenAI, ChatGPT is deployed across the hyperscalers. So that adds another level or layer of complexity and threat vector that need to be, attended to. And that focus needs to be, again, container centric, to be in the cluster to see all the east-west traffic that's taking place. So you can see firsthand and not depending on Kubernetes in a secondhand type of knowledge, but direct observation of the data sets that are flowing through and to look for any anomalies in there and to be able to call those out. And in fact, adding another layer of, runtime, real-time packet capture to see what's actually going on in your environment and be able to stop that threat. We had one customer in particular that we were deploying onto their infrastructure, and they saw a SQL injection taking place, and they didn't believe it. They thought it was part of the demo. And in actuality, our great solution architects like Jordan actually did a live packet capture to see that it was SQL commands, sure enough, in there, and they couldn't believe it. And a lot of security that they were paying for, millions of dollars, didn't see this. So it's important to look. Layer 4 is not enough. You have to look all the way up through layer 7, because that's where most of these attacks are taking place. So that's just another angle of having to stovepipe data up through a cloud environment. And so you need to go back to the common denominator of what's happening in your infrastructure to stop bad things from happening.
That brings up a good point, is you can't protect what you can't see. And the evolution of cloud native containers and Kubernetes, and it brings up a whole new realm of communication and ecosystem that doesn't exist in a traditional environment, and the traditional tools don't necessarily see that. Jordan, can you elaborate on that a bit, and how we help address that?
Yeah, I mean, first at SUSE, because we've got multiple layers of the infrastructure that we're very, very good at, and you can tell we definitely encourage doing defense in depth. We also want to really, not only from a solution, product software standpoint, but from our consulting organization, when we're coming in and talking to customers, really try to help hone in on what's relevant information. Like I said earlier, don't alert somebody to something they can't do something about. And there's always that balance between logging. I think you should log everything, and you should alert on intelligent things. We're very good at that. We're very good at helping those organizations see where those false positives might be. And like you're alluding to, Brent, also kind of false negatives. Everything looks okay. Well, we're not looking in the right place, right? And that's, you can hear me harping on a few things, defense in depth. Oh, the things that we're monitoring seem okay, like they are, but are you monitoring here? Like Jerry said, are you actually looking at data flows in a containerized environment versus just trusting what's egressing and ingressing at the far edge of your network? So that's where we try to help with tooling and capability to make sure that people are getting all the data they need and responding to it in an appropriate way. Right? You can't defend what you can't see.
Very good. So we're about 30 minutes in. We've got 30 minutes left, and we wanted to make this as interactive as possible. So we don't want to just go on ourselves. What I want to do is open it up, to the audience, and invite everybody in for posing questions, and seeing if hopefully we can answer or help provide some guidance. We teed up a couple of questions at the beginning. It sounds like everybody's got a compliance and regulatory concern. So in the context of cloud native and regulation and compliance, anybody want to kind of break the ice and offer a question that we either haven't touched on, or you want to drill into a little bit more?
Maybe Jamie knows the answer to this. Has the framework here, does it allow people to come off mute? Because I would like to hear people's voices and even see their faces, because this is a roundtable. I want to hear from the audience. Like, you folks are doing this job. Is what we're saying resonating? Are you thinking to yourself, these guys are nuts? I also want to hear that. We're part of a community here, and I definitely, like what Brent said, I really want to hear. We want to hear from you. Either type in the questions panel, or can we come off mute?
If you'd like to come off mute, just send a message in the chat and I can unmute you to ask your question.
While people are formulating their question, an area we hadn't talked about that I want to touch on a little bit, maybe not directly related to the AI threats, but I see one of the biggest concerns is, and demonstrated very broadly this last week, is supply chain quality and supply chain assurances, and being able to monitor and know your supply chain. as a critical security vector. Jordan, you wanna? I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm gonna open that up to you guys a little bit.
Okay, Brent, but I'm going to throw it back to you too, because I know you've got a lot of
Yep.
thoughts here, especially in your role.
The supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems with supply chain security is not just the obvious, please do it. But again, I noticed people going, we did the supply chain security thing by doing one thing in supply chain security. And I think the reason that organizations wind up doing that is there's this, and it's human nature, there's this pursuit of one set of tooling and one framework to rule them all. Like, I want a single pane of glass that does all of my security, and go, yep, as long as we're paying that thing enough money, we're certain they're secure. And I'm telling you, it just doesn't work. And Jerry's example of an organization that saw that SQL injection attack, which was a true story, they were an organization that was this was a sophisticated shop, very advanced development, security frameworks, were spending a lot of money on security tooling, but they really had a very sort of homogeneous solution that was doing an okay enough job at several things. I want to see people reach for a standard, a framework that meets your security requirements, and then make sure that the tools work for you, not the other way around. And if you wind up going, hey, we've got 7 layers of security we need in this organization, and you wind up with 5 solutions that make that work for you, that's okay. Don't water down your solution. That's the one that gives me the most heartache. And was I on task there, Brent? I felt like I ranted a little bit.
No, I think you are. Again, there's not one solution to it, and there's multiple aspects of supply chain, and I actually take a very broad view of supply chain, and it comes from your third-party vendors. Obviously, most companies get software from other companies and put that in production. And do you understand their processes of delivery of QA to know that they're what you're getting and you're getting exactly what they said you're going to get? And can you prove that? Second is, and I think people don't view this as a supply chain, but I absolutely do, is your own internal developers. Often your biggest supply chain. And that supply chain comes from both code they write and code they may borrow. Many companies are using open source today, right? And we're strong advocates of open source and the utilization of open source. And then the question becomes, where did they get their open source from? And did that come from a reliable source? And was it checked before it was brought in and put in a repository? And so I think, one of the areas that I've been spending quite a bit of time on is the aspect of your developers as your supply chain. And do you have all the protections in place that are necessary to ensure what they're delivering is of a secure nature, and not just today, but on a regular basis. And that's the other aspect, particularly when you get into your own code and your internal developers code. And if they've brought in open source projects and put in a repository, right? That open source, they may have scanned it when it was brought in and put it in a repository, and there were no vulnerabilities the day that it was brought in. The vulnerability was discovered on day 2.
Yep.
Right? And then it sits there latent for days, weeks, months, and it's just been in there and distributed all over your infrastructure. And so how often are you checking? Where do you check in that development pipeline? Do you continually check your repositories for new aspects that have been discovered? And then my final thought, on that and the criticality of today in particular of introducing, a shift left developer security model that's built in and automated and checking code throughout the release cycle is one of my favorite phrases, that I coined, is that if you're not introducing vulnerability scans along the CI/CD pipeline, what you've created is an infrastructure that is very effective at delivering vulnerabilities at scale, which is obviously not the goal. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the supply chain and all the different dimensions that contribute to supply chain and the criticality of continually scanning and monitoring that supply chain on an ongoing basis.
Picking up on that thought, Brent, if we learned anything, if there's any takeaway from the most recent events, which was not a malicious, but more of a code problem, integrating with, Microsoft, and it's the rise of the CI/CD pipeline, the continuous integration, continuous deployment, hurry, update, and the folks that delayed by hours in not deploying this upgrade were the ones who were saved. And it also proves how, AI is just going to increase the amount of connectedness we have in the world. It affected airlines, hospitals, banks, and it's just gonna, AI is gonna even make that, put that on steroids even more. So it's important to make sure that you're screening or taking your time a little bit more to make sure that your code is clean, making sure that you have, some of you may have been familiar with the pod security policy that Kubernetes had originally in the early versions that have been deprecated out in later versions. It's important to make sure those have been, re-input and are active in your environment to, to screen and to make sure. It would have been tough to catch this one. Someone had to be the 0-day person to prove that there was a problem with the CrowdStrike patch or update. But at the end of the day, AI also uses data poisoning, which is something that might not be easy to capture or to identify right off the bat. So it's important to just double check everything to minimize the vulnerability, and sometimes that takes a little slowing down, unfortunately, but I'd rather be a little slow than to be taken down, which can threaten the actual entity that's running the code.
Yeah, data poisoning is a tough one, right? That's why I worry about usage of AI as well, both internally and externally. I think there was the nice recipe for spaghetti with motor oil in it, example a few weeks ago, because somebody had deliberately poisoned the well, and the AI was like, I'm sure gasoline and other petrochemicals are delicious in this meal because I'm a robot and I don't have taste buds. So, check and recheck.
Yeah, absolutely, George. Okay, again, any of the attendees have questions that you would like to raise, or discussion topics maybe that we haven't touched on that you would like some thoughts or input on?
And do we have the mechanics to allow people to come up here? Sometimes these streaming web platforms don't allow people.
Yes, I have the ability. I just have to let the person know, or I have to do it on my end. So if someone wants to,
okay,
just let me know,
yes.
and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I have an unmute all button here, but I didn't want to surprise people by turning all their microphones on. That's not very nice. And also there is a questions panel in here. If your view looks much like mine, you have a control panel and there is a questions place, and that's a nice place to put questions, because it does allow them to be formatted nicely and put the answers back in. Makes it very, very easy. And I'm surprised this group hasn't asked any yet, given the experiences they've had.
Okay. Well, I think if we don't have any further questions, then we'll be able to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Any closing kind of each of you an opportunity for closing thoughts.
Yes, I see this over and over again. I know we've mentioned it on this call, and I'm going to reiterate it, that good tooling is good, but I see security issues come up mostly because of decisions, either a systems decision by human beings or errors by human beings. Do your defense in depth, investigate that, trust, desire trust out of your tools from a defense in depth standpoint. Make sure you're doing, confidential compute all the way across the board. And the other thing, from as a person standpoint, I worry about organizations that think they're a DevOps shop because they adopted certain tooling, and then they think they have that culture, and then certain tooling or platforms become this weird nebulous black box. Like, I run into a lot of organizations that have fantastic, operational best practices, compliance, security frameworks in place, and then you go look at their Docker or their Kubernetes environment, and it's just, we don't know what's happening in there. It's this black buzzing box. We're sure everything's fine. Please don't be that organization. But if you are, take comfort. There's thousands of you out there. Like, think and look. People are the place. That's been my lesson over and over again every day.
In my closing thoughts, has to do with leveraging artificial intelligence to identify AI-based attacks. And there are algorithms that are currently in development that are being used that can actually identify, AI-based attacks, based on certain references. So it's highly accurate. This is not currently, deployed throughout the country, or the footprint is very specific to certain agencies. But I think over time things will become more and more. It'll be spy versus spy, AI versus AI. But at this point, for the tools that we have, the most important thing is to make sure that you have your defenses up, shields up, as they say, for any type of vulnerability, and by actually blocking these attacks and not just observing them.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. And I guess my closing thoughts, very similar, just to kind of wrap it up and tie it up, is the vulnerabilities are coming from everywhere. Whether supply chain runtime, a known CVE or a 0-day, an automated attack or a phishing attack that causes an internal issue. And so you absolutely need a defense in depth strategy that covers, all of those dimensions. And it's, the old cliche, or maybe the newer cliche, is, it's not, when you're going to be, or if you're going to be attacked and compromised, it's when. And do you have a strong, defense in depth model in place? And I think that in my closing point would be coming back to one of the points that we brought up very early on, is that I think in today's environment, a 0-day model or a zero trust model is absolutely paramount, because they come fast, and 0 days are discovered every day, and you need to be able to stay in production when those are discovered. And the only way to do that with any degree of confidence is with a zero trust methodology. So with that, we'll wrap it up and let everybody go on with their day. I appreciate everybody's joining and the participation, and feel free to follow up with us on any further questions if you want any insight into the topics we talked about today.